Pat and I moved away from Stones River in 1979 when we went to Georgia for me to teach school. Our two girls were just barely getting around, 3 and 1. And when we came back to Murfreesboro some years later, we were over at North Boulevard and not back here. And then we went into ministry, and we've been all over. And now we're back, and we're going, what a great blessing it is to run into all the things that we see have not just been maintained, but have instead been pursued, have been chased, have been sought after, have been hunted down, have been grabbed a hold of. And even in ways that I would not have expected, because I don't know what you think. I said this is about the journey into God's heart of giving, and it's because of two things. One, because Ben and I were talking a few weeks ago about how we so often miss some of the best blessings of giving because we get focused only on part of what's going on, and that one of the things that really happens to us is that we get really excited about giving that feels personal to us. For example, it's a great thing we do here. I love that we do it because I've been in places where no matter what I said, we could never agree to do it this way. But if somebody really needs something, we say, hey, church, somebody really needs something. And we come through. And here's what I always heard about that. If we encourage people to do that, they won't give when the basket comes around. I thought, so we're going to teach them not to give, and that'll help them give when we ask them to? I did say to start this off that I lost this argument every time I've been in it. Okay? So I just rejoice. I go, this is a great thing. Because even in those arguments that I lost, I've never been part of an elder minister discussion group, either as a minister or as an elder, in which we were just worried about money for the number's sake. Never heard that. Because that's not what it's all about, and you know that here. And it's so great to see. But at the same time, here's the way I am. If I see a person's face that I can do something to help them, that feels so good, doesn't it? It just feels so much better. When somebody comes in and says, we had a fire, we don't have any clothes. Our house burned down when I was a kid in Taiwan, and I had the clothes that I was wearing. So they're there, and I go, wow. Yeah, I feel good about this. I want to do this. I just got to do this. Reaching in there going, wish I carried money. I carry a debit card. It's hard to drop that in the basket. The bank would get unhappy with me. So I don't do that. But I go, okay, now I carry a little money so I can do something because it feels good. It always feels good when you know that you're personally, directly, specifically touching somebody's life. You know what's harder for me is when it's indirect. When I know that we're doing all of these good things, but I don't feel it because I'm not directly at the point of contact. And let me show you what I mean here. I look in the bulletin, and before we came here, before we got back, and Pat's visiting, and she's sending me stuff, and I'm going, and I'm looking at the ministry list. I'm going, this church's got lots of things going on. And looking at them, and what I always look for are things that say every time we're doing this, it's an opportunity, it creates an opportunity to touch someone else with a little grace from Jesus. And I got to tell you that I look at what we do here and what we do, even if you think it just goes to pay the light bill, that's not true. We don't pay the light bill so we can have lights. We don't pay the light bill so we can have, the heat and air come on. We don't pay the water bill so we can have a water fountain and coffee. That's not what they're for. The only reason we pay any of those things is to enable us to be here and be present when somebody comes our way who needs to be touched by the grace of God. That's all it's for. And every penny that goes to that is not some money that we're showing away so we have to pay Caesar what Caesar. Of course you do, but that's not what we're doing. And I miss that myself over and over again, and I know better. And I still miss it. So I said, Ben, I think I want to talk about this. Because I'm a terrible giver. Confession time. I'm a terrible giver. I do not have the gift. There are people with the gift of giving. I know someone. Pat's dad was someone. He never let anybody know what he was giving. I had to marry her before I even began to find out. And even then I didn't find out because he didn't let them know. You know, he gave away money right and left. Why? Not, I don't want, because God made it possible for him to do it, so he did it. And he didn't want people to know about it. It's not what it was for. It's just like, I can do this. This is a great thing. I do it. And I've known people like that. You have to really know them well, because the people like that don't ever let you see it. They do that Jesus thing. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand's doing. You know what, Kyle? I can preach with just one hand talking. But it's not easy. The reason that it goes on and on, we miss, is because we get so disconnected from realizing that there is both an individual and personal thing going on, and there is a community thing. And that's so I said, I'm going to talk about this. And I picked some stories. These are going to sound, I thought, if I publish this outline, you're going to say, he's schizophrenic. How did he put these stories together? But I said, I got to tell you some things about how the community and the individual works, and they're both completely valid, and we desperately need them both. It's not enough to only feel good about giving when I get to see the smile. That's not enough. You're robbing yourself, and you're actually losing so much of what God is doing with you that you'll never see it. And that's just not healthy. So we got to talk community, and community responsibility is something we don't do well in the West. When I was in fourth grade, went to a little school, 3-story building, flat roof. Our playground was on the roof. Put big old chicken mesh wire up there so that when we were having recess, no kid would fall over. We couldn't play kickball because one kick and the ball's down in the street, so you had to play throw ball. And you had to be careful then. But one day, we were up on the roof playing, and some kids had dawdled, and a boy and a girl were down in the stairwell, and they were having some sort of argument that had started in class, and they were back and forth. And the boy, bam, he punches the young lady. We're all on the roof. They're down between floors 2 and 3. We're on the roof. There are 2 solid concrete floors between, and stairwells and doors and corners. We get hauled back into class. Recess is cut short. Right away, she's in trouble with me. You don't mess with recess. It's the only reason I went to school. See? And she hauls us in there, and she takes us, and she sits us down. She's got the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade kids all in the same room there. And she starts in on us. You have a responsibility to one another. You should be taking care of each other. Nobody should be able to hit someone else without you stopping. How could you let this go on? I went, they were 2 floors down. She said, you should have paid attention. I said, I can't see around corners. She said, oh, did I say that in 4th grade I was not very wise? Okay, you probably figured that out already, but there it was. And she goes on for 2 hours until she goes around every kid in the room. What do you? I'm sorry. I should love my brothers and sister more than they. I'm sorry. She gets to me. I said, I didn't do anything. We go around the room again. I didn't do anything. It hasn't changed since last time. We go around again. I'm looking at the clock. We're 10 minutes past getting out of school time. She gets around to me again. Everybody has confessed for the 3rd time. How many times you got to repent of something you didn't do? So there you go. I look at her. She has made her first mistake. She is not between me and the door. I jumped up and I sprinted for the door. And I said, I'm sorry I can't see through solid walls. Whew. Hit the door running down the stairs, 2 jumps each. When you're that age and you're not smart, you do anything. Out the door of the school, down the street, past the pedicab waiting to take us home. Sprinting. She's chasing me. I don't do communal responsibility very well. I didn't then, I still don't. And our view of it is such. Why? Because what are you all saying? Well, Bruce, you didn't do it. That's why it's so funny. That's why it's such a good story. Bruce, you didn't actually do anything wrong. Leave that one aside for a moment. Something about disrespect and sass. And basic rudeness and lack of courtesy might spring to mind. But we look at it and going, I didn't do it. Don't blame me for it. Don't punish me for what someone else did. I can't make them do. That's not my responsibility. I'm an Ezekiel 18 guy. The soul that sins shall die. The Father doesn't die for the sins of the Son. The Son shall not die for the sins of the Father. God said it. That's good enough for me. I didn't know Ezekiel 18 at that age in my life, or I'd have been yelling that at her. See? But God's sense of community responsibility, even though I still think she was actually using it wrong, I understand a little better, because she was trying to deal with a different sense of how we do owe each other quite a bit. We do owe each other quite a lot. There is a communal responsibility. The story of Achan is a story that bothers me. It's uncomfortable. You know why? You remember the story? They go to Jericho. They do the wonderful thing. We heard the walls fall down a few weeks ago again. And then everything in Jericho was to be destroyed. It all belonged to God. Nothing was to be taken. No loot. No prizes, no money, no conquest. Everything belonged to God, except Achan saw some really neat stuff, and he just couldn't help himself. And he grabbed it. And then they send a few people out to take over the city of Ai, and they get killed. And that slide with this picture here is here. And here's what God tells Joshua about it. Go ahead, Kyle. He says, get up. Why are you falling on your face? Why? Joshua's going, what happened? God, you were on our side, and this little bitty village just killed a bunch of my men. And he says, get up. Why are you on your face? Israel sinned. They transgressed. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. They took some of the stuff, and they hid them, and they lied. Until you get right, everybody's going to suffer. The whole community's at risk. And you're going, well, that wasn't fair to those 3,000 men that went over there. God, what was that all about? And God's saying, if I call you as a holy people, you are a holy people. That's all of you. You can't separate yourself out. I didn't call you one at a time into the solitary single Bruce kingdom. I called you into mine. And you're all in it together. And that's how it works. And when it doesn't work, if one part of you isn't following me, if one part of you, if just you, Bruce, have it in your head that you can do as you please and nobody out there will know, so it doesn't make any difference. Yes, it does. You're poisoning the well for everybody. Do you understand? You're poisoning the well for everybody because you're in this together. You can't separate yourself out. No, you're not all the same. No, you don't all feel the same. No, you don't like the same things. No, you don't understand things the same way. So what? God's the one who did this, not you. There is no way that anybody in this room could put together a group one half this size and have us get along for 10 minutes if it weren't God doing it. So Joshua took the instructions. They find Achan, and they go confront Achan. And Achan says, yeah, I took the stuff, here it is. And they put him to death. And we're going, oh, I hate this story. This is a terrible story, but the problem is we're having to learn something. You cannot chase your own thing and do your own thing and not be damaging the rest of the body. And that's not telling us to be conformists, cookie cutter, stamped out of the same mold. Everybody thinks the same, looks the same. That's not what that means. It means a healthy living thing needs every cell to be healthy. And that's what the community is doing for us. And so we go on. Let's go ahead, find a story that's a little better than Achan. We go to the book of Acts, and we get stories in the book of Acts from chapters 2 to 6. And we find when they started, they were so excited. You had thousands of people. And they were travelers, lots of them. And they weren't at home. They were far from home. And so what they do? They started giving, what did they? Gave each other meals every day, gave them a place to sleep. If they needed clothes, they gave them clothes. They stayed around. They were together every day. They were in each other's house daily, from house to house, breaking bread together, giving everything. And it got too big for that. It got too big for that. And so you get where now what do we do? So they got some men and said, hey, we can't even take care of everybody like this. So people started bringing money. And you get the great story of Barnabas. He says, well, I got some property I don't really need. He sells it and he brings the money from that sale of property and he hands it, puts it down at the apostles' feet, says, whoever needs something, let's take care of them. And the apostles get some guys going, man, we ain't got time to do this. Who's good at managing something? Oh, you guys. You take care of it. And so they're taking care of everybody. Now the community is taking responsibility. And here's the deal. Everybody in the community is responsible for taking care of everybody in the community. Was that Barnabas? Is Barnabas taking care of them? Nope. Was feeding all those Grecian widows Barnabas' sole responsibility? Nope. Barnabas do it all by himself? Nope. Why? Because it was an us thing. It's us. It's our task. It's our ministry. If you weren't Barnabas, did you have no part in that ministry? Thank you for playing. Yes, you did. It was your ministry. And out of that, you got somebody who began to get what I call the consumer thing again. You get this story you don't like, Ananias and Sapphira in Acts chapter 5. Short version of the story, they saw how popular Barnabas was. Barnabas is a great guy. Everybody says so. Look what he just did. So they sold some property, and they said, man, look at that. We sold that property. Got a nice return on investment, too. So I don't want to give all of it away. That's just too much. Yeah, I don't want to either, honey. I have no idea who said what first. See? But they both agreed going, okay, well, let's just give some of it. Okay. Then they said, but boy, I sure wish people liked me like they like Barnabas. You ever seen somebody say, I sure wish people thought about me the way I think about that person? Be careful. So they said, well, let's just tell them that's all of it. They don't need to know. It's ours. We'll just give them this much, but we'll tell them it's all of it because we just really don't let your insecurities make your decisions for you. Okay? Insecurities, by definition, are not something you want to stand on. So they do it. And what happens, of course, is Ananias comes in, they do it, and Peter says, you sold the property for this much? Yeah, that's what we sold it for. Here's all of it. You sure about that, Ananias? Here's all of it. Are you really sure about this, Ananias? Do you want to die on this hill? Falls down dead. Evidently, he did want to die on that hill. That it was more important to him to think someone might perceive him in a different way than to actually do. He had giving meant nothing to him. Giving was not an offering to God for him. He had a completely different agenda. And he falls down dead. His wife comes in. She says, oh, did you sell it for this? Yeah, we sold it for that much. That's all of it. Here you go. Oh, not again. She falls down dead. The moral of the story is not that you have to give everything you have, because what does Peter say to them? Peter says, wasn't it yours? Wasn't it yours? Didn't God entrust it to you? Hadn't God made you the steward of it? Wasn't it yours? Wasn't it up to you what you did with it? And when you sold it, wasn't it still yours? Wasn't it up to you? What made you think you had to do it like this? Why? Sometimes we just turn giving into something other than a simple response to God. And any time it's something besides a simple response to God, who has given everything for us, then we're going to be losing the blessing. There's no way we're going through all of these, Kyle, but hang on to your hats. I was looking at what Paul said, because Paul talked about giving a lot, and he did it in a really nice way for Paul, who sometimes just told you were stupid and wrong. But he was talking to the Corinthians, and evidently by the time he got to 2 Corinthians 8, he'd had enough of that. You're really wrong and getting everything messed up. So he talks to them a little bit more nicely. But he starts talking about giving, and he reflects on it in chapter 8, saying, I want you to know. Now he's writing to Corinth in chapter 8, because they had heard that Jerusalem was in trouble. The saints there were hungry. They didn't have enough to eat. There wasn't enough work. Times were tough. And so they said, well, we want to help. They said, we want to help. But then they hadn't helped, and it's been quite a while now. And so Paul says, I want you to know about the grace of God that has been given to the churches of Macedonia. Macedonia is not Corinth. Gentle rebuke, I said. One cheek only. Gentle rebuke. The grace that God has given the churches of Macedonia in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty. What? This is the church that gives. Out of their affliction, their abundance of joy, in their extreme poverty, have overflowed in a wealth of generosity. And I'm like, oh boy, I really hate this chapter. I'm unemployed and I've been feeling good about the proportion of my income that I can give. When I do it on my income against what I can give, I feel so good. Take that, tithe. 10% of zero is really easy to give. I can give 50% of that. Shoot, I can do a Barnabas with that. It's meaningless, isn't it? You see what I mean? It's a meaningless thing when we start thinking like that. We have trapped ourselves into a circle of non-understanding. The Macedonians, the churches of Galatia, they were in a bad shape. They had nothing. He says they gave according to their means and beyond their means of their own accord, begging us for the favor of taking part in this. Gave what they couldn't afford to give because you people are in trouble. Look, we're still eating. Let us help. There was a man in church in Washington who had been unemployed for some time, and he would come in with a huge load of stuff at Christmas time when we do Christmas toys for people in Honduras and for people in the town and other things. And he would just, and I knew he'd buying it on a credit card that he can't afford to pay. And I'm like, Jerry, you can't do this. And it dawned on me one day that it was really important to him that no matter how bad things were for him, he needed desperately to reach out and touch somebody else because he thought they were worse off than he was. I didn't realize that until I was preaching his funeral. And then I looked at his daughters and I said, let me tell you what your dad taught me. I don't know that he was fiscally wise. I know he wasn't. But his heart was in the right place on that one. Because they never saw him. They never knew his name. He got nothing from it except, I've got to be part of helping these people because they need it. And that's why I don't work for a financial advisement company. But then Paul goes back to the Corinthians and he says, you know all about the grace of Jesus, don't you? Right? Do you understand that though he was rich, for our sake he became poor? And I wonder if you ever really thought about that. Incarnation is not just that God is actually physically present with us on the earth, even though that's something that blows my mind every time I think about it. I go, how can you do it? I've been asking that question ever since I realized what that meant. God, how did you do that? How do you do it? I can't explain it. I can't even talk. How do you do it? God going, shh, Bruce. This is where, listen to the Spirit. Bruce, I do it because I'm God and you're not. Okay, so get over it. Yes, Lord, I'm trying. But how did you do that? Because it blows my mind that you would even want to do that. Because I think the world's pretty messed up most of the time. And there's places in the world I don't want to go. There's experiences I don't want to have. And you came and you volunteered. And you came. For our sake, though he was rich, he became poor. You betcha. What Paul say? Being in the very form of God, he did not consider equality with God a thing to be held on to, but emptied himself. He poured it out and says, whoo, leaving it behind. And I'm going, unbelievable. How could you ever do it? And Paul says, forget the slides, Kyle. We're going to wing it. Paul says, guys, that's what you got to understand about giving. You made a pledge, and I'm going to get on you right here because you gave yourself to a work. And once you did as a community, you need to do what you said to the Lord you wanted to do. Because you're part of it. You don't have to do the whole thing. It doesn't matter how big or how small you think that part is. What matters is that you gave yourself to the work. Like the churches in Galatians, they gave themselves first to God, and then everything else came right out of that. So Corinth, you've given yourself to God. Let it flow out of that. It doesn't matter what it is. Whatever it is, put it aside every week if you have to. A little bit at a time is fine. Just get it all ready. We don't care what it is. What we care about is you are part of this because the body is one body and you're all touched with the other. And you said you want to do it, so let's just do it and do it in a way that lets you be blessed. And I just thought about how right here, when we think about Christmas time, we're going to talk about keeping Jesus in Christmas. It's about his birth. It's about incarnation. It's about presence. It's about God with us. It's about the inexpressible gift of Jesus Christ. And the very fact that any time we give, if we're putting it in the plate, it's because there's someone out there that we're going to touch as Stones River. Someone out there in Honduras who's going to hear about Jesus and maybe have something to eat, maybe have a place to sleep. Somebody in Africa who's going to realize that they can be a minister of the gospel and they can talk about Jesus to other people. It won't matter what it is because it's you doing it. It's you doing it. And you need to look at that list of things that this church does and things it's part of as Stones River and say, that's what we're doing. And rejoice in it. It doesn't even matter if that's the one you love the most. Everybody's got a favorite ministry. That's perfectly fine. It probably matches up with your calling. You're supposed to. Don't rob yourself of the joy of everybody else's. Please? Pretty please? I'm only 62. I figured this out, like in the last 10 minutes. So I got to give you at least 62 years to get up where I am. Just don't waste them. Go ahead and let God talk to you. Because what we're seeing in all things, Paul ended his letter to the Colossians with a brief word to a guy named Archippus. I'm glad that's not my name. Thweatt's bad enough. If I were Archippus Thweatt, I just think I would have to jump off a cliff. But right at the end of the Colossians letter, he says, and Archippus, see that you fulfill the ministry you've received in the Lord. And I sit there and I go, I don't know, John, do you do this? All right, what was his ministry? What can I deduce? And I go, well, boy, no help there. I have no idea what his ministry was. What I know is that Paul was saying, Archippus, God called you to something. You accepted it, just like the Corinthians. They accepted it. They pledged themselves to it. So fulfill it. Let God do with you what God's called you to do. And don't rob yourself of the joy that comes from realizing that what you might think is a tiny little thing is no tiny thing because it is what God is doing. And you're part of what God is doing. And there are no measurements for that kind of ministry. How do you measure what God is doing? Impossible. So let me challenge you. I have no idea what you should give or to what. I have no desire whatsoever to even try to answer that question for you. I do not want to know. What I want to know is, God, will we fulfill our ministry together? That what this church as a body, as a family has said, these are things, God, that you laid before us and we said yes to. So God, let us do it with joy. Let us just do it with passion. Let us do it with everything we got. And let you worry about where it takes us and what the harvest is. Because all our part is to give ourselves to the ministry that you've given us in total faith. There's a lot of blessing that we miss by not thinking of ourselves as part of every single good thing that God does through our fellowship together. And we don't need to lose that because we actually need that joy to keep us from getting distracted from all the times when the enemy throws stuff in front of us and we have to do a little quick step, split step hurdle. And we're not called to be miserable, whining people talking about how tough it is to follow Jesus. We're called to be people who say, there's lots of tough stuff, but boy, Jesus is better than that. And it's worth it. Paul says, I count my present afflictions as nothing compared to the hope that is before me. Got to tell you, I'm not always there, but I'm a lot closer than I used to be. And I'm not a very good giver. But I keep saying, God, keep teaching me. Maybe one of these days I'll really get it. And when I do, I'll probably never know, because it will have become something that comes out of the heart of God that He has given me. And it won't be something that I think about. It won't be something that I have to analyze and come up with my formula. Am I doing well enough if I'm up to 11%? Oh, by the way, is that pre-tax or post-tax? You know, as soon as those questions disappear and all that's left is, here is what God has given me, that inexpressible gift of grace. And here, God, I have given myself first to you, and whatever else comes up, I'm going to respond to it. And I think when we get there, we won't actually know it, because it will just be who we are, because we have become closer and closer into the heart of God, where His journey has always taken us. Will you pray with me? Oh, Lord God, you give and give and give. You give when we don't even know you're giving. You give when we don't seem to care. You give when we don't want what you're giving because we don't want what's best for us. You give out of your heart. You give out of your love. You give out of your perfection. And you give it to us freely. Now, God, I pray, keep teaching us, keep teaching me, keep teaching each one, to let your heart in more and more, to let your Spirit grow deeper and deeper, to let your presence shape and shape and shape some more until your heart is the heart that responds to the things we see through these eyes. Bless this church, Father, with your heart. Help us to grow in the ways that honor you, of giving ourselves first to you and then to the ministries to which you've called us. Father, help us fulfill our calling in Jesus' name.